The acrid smell of burning herbs filled Lydia's modest physician's chamber in Athens as she crushed dried beetles with practiced precision. Her patient, a wealthy merchant's wife, sat nervously on the wooden bench, twisting her himation between jeweled fingers. "The Spanish fly must be measured exactly," Lydia murmured, her dark eyes focused on the bronze scales before her. "Too little brings no passion, too much brings death." The woman had come, seeking what so many sought, a remedy for a loveless marriage, a spark to rekindle what time had extinguished. Outside, the agora buzzed with afternoon commerce, but here, in this dim sanctuary of bottles and scrolls, Lydia practiced an art both sacred and dangerous. She had learned from her mentor, old Diocles, that the human heart craved love as desperately as the lungs craved air. The beetle powder glowed crimson in the lamplight as she carefully folded it into a square of papyrus. "Mix this with honey wine," she instructed, "but never more than a pinch. The god Eros is generous, but he punishes greed." As the woman departed, clutching her remedy, Lydia couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was approaching. The oracle at Delphi had spoken of a journey, of knowledge that would shake the foundations of empire. She returned to her mortar and pestle, unaware that by sunset a Roman centurion would arrive with a summons that would change everything.
The acrid smell of burning herbs filled Lydia's modest physician's chamber in Athens as she crushed dried beetles with practiced precision. Her patient, a wealthy merchant's wife, sat nervously on the wooden bench, twisting her hymation between jeweled fingers. "The Spanish fly must be measured exactly," Lydia murmured, her dark eyes focused on the bronze scales before her. "Too little brings no passion, too much brings death." The woman had come seeking what so many sought, a remedy for a loveless marriage, a spark to rekindle what time had extinguished. Outside, the agora buzzed with afternoon commerce, but here in this dim sanctuary of bottles and scrolls, Lydia practiced an art both sacred and dangerous. She had learned from her mentor, old Diocles, that the human heart craved love as desperately as the lungs craved air. The beetle powder glowed crimson in the lamplight as she carefully folded it into a square of papyrus. "Mix this with honey wine," she instructed, "but never more than a pinch. The god Eros is generous, but he punishes greed." As the woman departed, clutching her remedy, Lydia couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was approaching. The oracle at Delphi had spoken of a journey, of knowledge that would shake the foundations of empire. She returned to her mortar and pestle, unaware that by sunset, a Roman centurion would arrive with a summons that would change everything. The Roman centurion stood like a bronze statue in Lydia's doorway, his scarlet cloak still dusty from the road. "You are the physician Lydia, student of Diocles." His Latin was crisp, authoritative. She nodded, noting the imperial seal on the scroll he carried. "Caesar requires your expertise in Rome. You leave at dawn." Her heart raced, not from fear, but from curiosity. What could the most powerful man in the world want with a Greek physician who specialized in the ancient arts of desire? She had heard whispers in the agora about strange deaths in Rome. Nobles found with their faces frozen in expressions of ecstasy, their hearts stopped mid-beat. The centurion's eyes betrayed nothing as she asked, "May I know the nature of this summons?" He shifted slightly, armor clinking. "There has been an incident, a poison disguised as an aphrodisiac. Caesar believes someone with your particular knowledge might identify the substance." That night, Lydia packed her most precious possessions, her mentor's scrolls on Egyptian love magic, a collection of rare seeds from Parthia, and most importantly, her journal documenting every aphrodisiac formula she had ever encountered. As she wrapped her bronze scales, a gift from Diocles on his deathbed, she remembered his final words. "The line between medicine and poison is drawn only by dosage and intent." Tomorrow she would leave everything she knew for the marble halls of Rome. where passion and power intertwined like poisonous vines. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly before them as their ship cut through wine-dark waters toward Rome. Lydia stood at the rail, studying the small leather pouch the centurion, who had finally introduced himself as Marcus, had given her. Inside were fragments of a shattered glass vial and dried residue that sparkled with an unnatural iridescence. This was found beside Senator Quintus, Marcus explained, joining her at the rail. He was Caesar's ally, about to expose a conspiracy. She held the residue to the light, noting its crystalline structure. "This isn't purely botanical," she observed. "Someone combined multiple substances. I detect wolfsbane, but also something sweet, perhaps honey or date wine to mask the bitterness." Marcus watched her work with surprising interest. "You can determine all that from residue?" She smiled slightly. "My mentor taught me that every poison tells a story. This one speaks of expertise, someone who understands both the Greek pharmacopoeia and Eastern alchemy." The ship lurched suddenly, and Marcus steadied her with a firm hand. "There's something else," he said quietly. "Quintus wasn't the first. 3 other senators have died similarly in the past month, all Caesar's supporters, all found with traces of supposed aphrodisiacs." Lydia felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about identifying a poison. It was about preventing an assassination that could plunge the Roman world into chaos. As gulls cried overhead and Rome grew closer, she began to understand why Caesar had summoned specifically her. Rome overwhelmed Lydia's senses as their litter carried them through the Forum Romanum. The cacophony of languages, the press of bodies, the mingling scents of incense, sweat, and cooking meat, all so different from orderly Athens. Marcus guided her through Caesar's villa, past suspicious guards and curious slaves, to a private chamber where the most powerful man in the world waited. Julius Caesar was smaller than she expected, but his presence filled the room like smoke from a sacrificial fire. "The Greek physician," he said, his sharp eyes appraising her. "They say you learned from Diocles himself, that you know secrets lost since Alexander's time." She inclined her head respectfully. "I know what was taught, Imperator." He gestured to a table where several items lay arranged. More poison vials, a half-eaten honey cake, and disturbingly, a scroll listing names, some crossed out in red ink. "Someone is using the promise of passion to deliver death," Caesar said bluntly. "My enemies grow bold, hiding behind Cupid's mask." Lydia examined each item methodically, her trained nose detecting subtle variations in the residues. "These aren't all the same formula," she announced, causing Caesar to lean forward with interest. "The killer is experimenting, refining their method. Each death teaches them something new." Caesar's jaw tightened. "Then they plan to strike again." She met his gaze steadily. "Yes, and I believe their ultimate target sits before me." These senators were practice, learning the perfect dose to ensure a quick, untraceable death that appears natural.
The slave market of Rome was a grim place, steeped in despair and empty promises. Lydia had come here with a purpose. Several of the murdered senators had recently acquired slaves from a certain dealer who specialized in exotic servants from the East. Marcus, disguised as a wealthy merchant, accompanied her while she took on the role of his wife, looking for an attendant. The dealer, a slick Phoenician named Hamilcar, boasted of his finest offerings, young women and men from across the empire, many of whom appeared drugged into docility. "I am in need of someone skilled in Eastern beauty rituals," Lydia said carefully, watching Hamilcar's every move. His eyes brightened with greed. "Ah, Domina, I have just the one for you. A Chinese girl trained in the imperial court of the Han. She can teach you secrets to charm your husband like no other." The girl he presented was no older than 16, with sharp eyes that betrayed her outwardly submissive demeanor. As Hamilcar turned to haggle with Marcus, The girl leaned in and whispered urgently in broken Greek. "You are the physician Caesar sought. I know of the deaths, but my master must not hear of it." Lydia's heart raced. She insisted on buying the girl right away, no matter the cost. As they left the market, the girl, introducing herself as Mei Ling, shared her first clue. Hamilcar does not just deal in slaves. He provides special potions to certain clients, formulas he claims come from the concubines of the Han dynasty, but these formulas, they are not what they seem.
In the safety of Lydia's provided quarters near the Palatine Hill, Mei Ling finally spoke freely. "I was not born a slave," she began, preparing tea with practiced grace. "My father was an imperial physician in Chang'an. He discovered something terrible, a network of traders selling false aphrodisiacs mixed with deadly substances, targeting noble families across 3 empires. She produced a small silk pouch hidden in her robes, containing seeds Lydia didn't recognize. These are from the Manchurian wilderness. When prepared correctly, they enhance desire, but combined with certain Roman herbs, they become a poison that mimics heart failure from excessive passion." Lydia examined the seeds under lamplight, noting their unusual coloration. "Your father tried to stop this trade." Mei Ling's eyes darkened. "He was murdered for it. I was sold to silence me, but I memorized his formulas, both the true aphrodisiacs and their deadly corruptions." Marcus, who had been standing guard, stepped forward. "Can you identify who in Rome is creating these poisons?" The Chinese girl nodded slowly. "Hamilcar is just a supplier. The true mastermind is someone with access to Caesar's inner circle, someone who knows which senators to target and when. They call themselves the perfumer." Lydia felt the pieces beginning to connect. "We need to trace these seeds back to their source. Mei Ling, can you teach me the proper preparation methods? If we understand the true formula, we can identify the corrupted version and perhaps create an antidote." The Subura district after midnight was no place for decent Romans, which made it perfect for clandestine meetings. Following Mei Ling's intelligence, Lydia and Marcus tracked a shipment of Eastern goods to a warehouse near the Tiber. The building reeked of incense and stranger scents, myrrh from Arabia, cinnamon from India, and something else, something that made Lydia's trained nose recoil. They watched from the shadows as hooded figures unloaded crates marked with Chinese characters. "Those symbols," Mei Ling whispered, "they say celestial thunder. It's a code name for the most potent aphrodisiac blend, supposedly used by the Yellow Emperor himself." Marcus gripped his gladius. "How many guards?" But before anyone could answer, screams erupted from inside the warehouse. They rushed forward to find workers writhing on the ground, foam at their lips. One crate had broken open, releasing a cloud of glittering powder into the air. Lydia immediately covered her nose and mouth, shouting, "Don't breathe it in! It's airborne!" One dying worker gasped out a warning. "The perfumer knows you're here. Trap!" The warehouse suddenly erupted in flames, forcing them to flee. As they escaped through twisting alleys, Lydia realized with growing horror that they weren't just dealing with a poisoner. They were facing someone who understood chemical warfare on a level that shouldn't exist in the ancient world. The enemy knew they were investigating, and worse, seemed to be always one step ahead. Caesar's face was granite as Lydia reported the warehouse incident. 7 dead workers, and the fire destroyed most evidence, she concluded. But we learned something crucial. The perfumer has resources beyond a simple poisoner. This is an organization, not an individual. The dictator paced his study like a caged lion. "The Senate meets in 3 days for the Ides of Martius. If this perfumer plans to strike, it will be then." He fixed Lydia with his penetrating gaze. "Can you create an antidote?" She hesitated, then nodded. "With Mei Ling's knowledge and my Greek training, possibly. But I need access to your personal physician's stores. Some ingredients are too rare for common acquisition. Caesar granted it immediately, but added a warning. Trust no one in my household. The conspiracy that seeks my death has roots everywhere. That afternoon, in Caesar's private medical chambers, Lydia made a disturbing discovery. Several rare ingredients were missing, exactly the ones needed for the poisoned aphrodisiac. The thief had to be someone with intimate knowledge of both medicine and the household routine. She shared this with Marcus, who had been investigating the senator's deaths. "There's a pattern," he said. "Each victim received a gift before dying. Exotic oils, mysterious wines, all from an admirer who signed themselves as one who worships Venus." Lydia felt a chill. Venus, goddess of love, patron of aphrodisiacs. The perfumer wasn't just a murderer. They saw themselves as an artist of desire and death. The name came from an unexpected source. Calpurnia, Caesar's wife, approached Lydia in the villa's gardens at dawn. "I know who you seek," she said without preamble. "There's a woman who visits the senator's wives, offering beauty treatments and love counseling. She calls herself Valentina, claims to be from Syracuse, but her accent is wrong." Calpurnia's hands trembled as she continued. "She gave me a perfume last month, said it would ensure my husband's devotion. I never used it. Something felt wrong. When I heard about the deaths, I had a slave tested on rats. They died within hours. Their hearts burst from racing too fast." Lydia examined the ornate bottle Calpurnia produced. Phoenician glass, with Egyptian hieroglyphs. "This is sophisticated work. Where does Valentina conduct her business?" "She has a shop near the Temple of Venus Genetrix. But be careful. She has many clients among the powerful, women desperate to keep their husband's attention in a city full of temptations." Lydia found herself admiring Calpurnia's intelligence and caution. "You may have saved your husband's life by trusting your instincts." The Roman woman's expression was unreadable. "Perhaps, or perhaps I've merely delayed the inevitable. The Ides approach, and my dreams are full of blood." As Lydia left the garden, she couldn't shake the feeling that Calpurnia knew more than she was saying. Not about the conspiracy, but about fate itself. The shop of Valentina stood like a jewel box among the squalor near Venus's temple, its facade painted with murals of cupids and doves, windows displaying alabaster jars promising eternal beauty and irresistible allure. Lydia entered alone, having convinced Marcus that a male presence would raise suspicion. The interior was a sensual assault of competing fragrances, and behind a curtain of hanging silk scarves stood the woman herself. Valentina was perhaps 40, still beautiful in that calculated way of those who know every secret of cosmetic enhancement. Her eyes, lined with Egyptian kohl, assessed Lydia instantly. "A Greek physician," she purred in accented Latin. "How fascinating. Have you come to learn or to accuse?" Lydia decided on directness. "I've come to understand. Your formulas are remarkable. The balance of ingredients, the subtlety of preparation. You studied in Alexandria, didn't you?" Valentina's smile was sharp as a blade. "Among other places, the library there, before it burned, held scrolls from India describing Soma, the drink of the gods. The Persians taught me about Hauma. And in Carthage," she paused. "But you didn't come for history lessons." "The senators who died, they were your clients?" Lydia asked carefully. Valentina laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Clients, number experiments. You see, my dear, the greatest aphrodisiac isn't chemical. It's power. And someone paid very well to test my theories." She moved closer, and Lydia caught a scent that made her head swim. "The question is, are you here as Caesar's physician, or do you seek knowledge for yourself?" Valentina's workshop behind the shop revealed the true extent of her expertise. Glass alembics and copper distillation equipment that wouldn't be seen in Europe for centuries lined the walls. "The Arabs taught me this," she explained, demonstrating a complex extraction process. "They call it alchemia. But the principles, those are universal. She showed Lydia a collection of scrolls. From every corner of the world, recipes for passion. The Scythians use fermented mare's milk mixed with cannabis. The Egyptians prefer blue lotus steeped in wine. But the Chinese... She produced a jade box. They understand that desire begins in the mind. Inside were pills that looked like tiny pearls. Made from rare fungi that grow only on certain mountains, mixed with cinnabar and pearl powder. In small doses, they open the mind to suggestion. In larger doses... She shrugged eloquently. Lydia realized she was being offered a devil's bargain. Knowledge in exchange for silence. "You're not the perfumer," she said slowly. "You're the weapon. Someone else chooses the targets." Valentina's facade cracked slightly. "Even artists must eat, and my patron promised me something more valuable than gold. Protection from Roman law and access to ingredients from across the empire." "Who?" Lydia pressed. But before Valentina could answer, they heard shouting from the shop. Marcus burst through the curtain, sword drawn. "We need to leave. Now there's a mob coming. Someone told them a poisoner works here." Valentina's eyes widened in genuine fear. "I've been betrayed." They escaped through the temple complex as the mob torched Valentina's shop. The irony wasn't lost on Lydia, fleeing through Venus's sacred grounds, while the goddess's own tools of passion burned behind them. In a hidden cellar beneath the temple, they caught their breath. Valentina clutched a leather satchel containing her most precious formulas. 20 years of work, she whispered, watching smoke rise through the grates above. Gone because someone feared I'd talk. Marcus kept his sword pointed at her. "You're still a poisoner. Those senators were fools who thought they could buy love," Valentina snapped. "But I never chose them. Orders came through intermediaries, always different, always paid in foreign gold." She looked at Lydia. "You want to know who the perfumer is? Look for someone who understands both Roman politics and Eastern alchemy, someone who's traveled the Silk Road." Mei Ling, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke. "The Han Court kept records of all foreign physicians who studied our methods. My father mentioned a Roman who came seeking knowledge of immortality elixirs 10 years ago. He was young, brilliant, and ruthless." Valentina's eyes widened. "Describe him." As Mei Ling spoke, a portrait emerged that made Lydia's blood run cold. The description matched someone in Caesar's inner circle, someone who had been present at every meeting, who knew every detail of their investigation, someone who had been steering them all along. "Brutus," she breathed. "Marcus Junius Brutus." "Impossible," Marcus said flatly. "Brutus is Caesar's adopted son, his chosen heir. Why would he—" But Lydia was already connecting pieces that had seemed unrelated. Because Caesar won't live forever, and Brutus is impatient. But he can't simply assassinate Caesar. The people would revolt. He needs Caesar to die naturally, or appear to. Valentina laughed bitterly. "Brilliant boy. He came to me 2 years ago, fascinated by the Chinese concept of death by ecstasy. He wanted to know if one could create a poison that would make its victim die at the height of passion, leaving no trace but a stopped heart. They had to warn Caesar immediately, but the mob above was still searching for them. Mei Ling suggested using the old aqueduct tunnels that connected to the Palatine Hill. As they navigated the dank passages, Valentina revealed more disturbing truths. Brutus didn't just study poisons. He learned the art of suggestion, of making people crave what would destroy them. He understands that the most powerful aphrodisiac is forbidden desire itself. The tunnels echoed with dripping water and their urgent footsteps. Lydia's mind raced. If Brutus was the perfumer, then every move they'd made had been anticipated. He'd been playing them like pieces on a board, moving them exactly where he wanted. The Ides, she said suddenly. He's planning something for the Ides, but not just poison. Something public, something that will look like divine judgment. Marcus cursed. The Senate meeting. Caesar will be surrounded by hundreds. Impossible to protect him from everyone. They emerged in Caesar's villa to find chaos. Guards ran everywhere, and Caesar himself stood in his study, reading a letter with a face carved from marble. "You're too late," he said as they entered, dripping and disheveled. "Brutus has fled. But he left this." The letter was a confession of sorts, but written like a philosophical treatise. It spoke of Rome's destiny, of the corruption of power, of how Caesar had become a disease that required a precise cure. "He claims he acts for Rome," Caesar said quietly, "that my death will restore the Republic." Lydia read the letter's postscript with growing alarm. "He's challenged you. Tomorrow at the Senate, he'll present you with a gift, a crown of laurel leaves treated with his ultimate creation. If you refuse it, you appear weak. If you accept it, period. I die," Caesar finished, "poisoned by my own ambition, in front of the entire Senate. Poetic." Valentina examined the letter. The formula he describes, it's theoretical only. No one has ever successfully created it. She looked troubled. Unless he found something in China that I didn't know about. Mei Ling studied the description. "This sounds like the Emperor's Last Breath, a legendary poison my grandfather spoke of. It was supposedly used only once to kill a tyrant king. The formula was destroyed because it was too dangerous." Caesar stood. "Then, we have tonight to create an antidote to something that might not even exist." He looked at each of them. "The Senate will not be delayed. Rome watches. If I don't appear tomorrow, Brutus wins anyway." The night became a desperate race against time. In Caesar's private laboratory, an unprecedented collaboration unfolded. Greek medicine, Chinese alchemy, and Roman pragmatism united against a perfect poison. Lydia organized their approach with medical precision. "We need three things: to understand the poison's mechanism, to find its weakness, and to create something that can be administered secretly." Valentina worked on analyzing the theoretical formula, her expertise in toxic combinations invaluable. "Brutus is using a cascade effect," she explained, drawing diagrams on wax tablets. "Multiple substances that are harmless alone, but deadly in combination, triggered by body heat and excitement." Mei Ling prepared traditional Chinese antidotes, grinding rare minerals and herbs. In the Han court, emperors take daily doses of tiny poisons to build immunity. But we don't have months. We have hours. Marcus coordinated security, ensuring no word of their work reached Brutus's spies. He also revealed crucial intelligence. Brutus has supporters among the senators. They call themselves the Liberators. Tomorrow won't just be an assassination, it's a coup. Caesar himself participated, his sharp mind grasping chemical principles quickly. "If we can't stop the poison, can we slow it? Give me time to expose Brutus before I fall." Lydia mixed compounds with desperate precision. "There's one possibility: flooding your system with competing substances that will confuse the poison's targeting. It won't stop it, but it might delay it." As dawn approached, they had not an antidote, but a desperate gamble. The Senate House loomed like a tomb in the morning light. Caesar, dressed in his finest toga, had taken their preventive mixture, a cocktail of antidotes that made him slightly nauseous but might save his life. Lydia, Valentina, and Mei Ling waited in an antechamber, ready with emergency treatments. Marcus commanded the guards, though they couldn't prevent senators from approaching Caesar. The session began normally, with routine business that seemed surreal given what they knew was coming. Then Brutus entered, carrying an ornate box. The Senate fell silent. "Caesar," Brutus announced, his voice carrying across the marble hall, "the people of Rome wish to honor you." He opened the box, revealing a crown of laurel leaves that seemed to shimmer with an unnatural sheen. Accept this, and accept their love. Caesar stood slowly. The entire Senate watched, some eagerly, others with hidden knowledge of what was to come. The people's love, Caesar said clearly, is not won with crowns, but with service. He reached for the laurel crown. Lydia held her breath. Everything they'd prepared for came down to this moment. Caesar lifted the crown, examined it theatrically, then did something unexpected. He broke it in half. "I accept half," he declared, "for the victories I've won." He placed one half on his head. "The other half belongs to Rome itself." The crowd murmured in confusion. Brutus's face showed a flicker of panic. Caesar had taken only half the dose. Caesar swayed, but remained standing. The half dose of poison coursed through him, but the preventive cocktail fought back. His voice rang out, "Citizens of Rome, I have been poisoned by one who claims to love the Republic." The Senate erupted in chaos. Brutus stepped forward, pulling a dagger. "If poison fails, steel will not." But he hadn't counted on Valentina's knowledge being turned against him. She had given Lydia a special powder. Thrown into the air, it would reveal anyone who had handled the poisoned laurels. Marcus gave the signal, and Lydia cast the powder across the Senate floor. In the swirling cloud, several senators began to glow with a faint phosphorescence. Brutus's co-conspirators, marked by their own treachery. "Liberators," Caesar gasped, fighting to stay conscious. "You call yourselves liberators while you skulk with poisons like common murderers." The marked senators drew daggers, realizing their exposure. But the loyal guards, guided by Marcus, were ready. Steel clashed against steel as the Senate became a battlefield. Mei Ling rushed to Caesar with the emergency antidote, a concentrated extract of everything they'd prepared. "Drink this, quickly," she urged. Caesar drank, his body convulsing as poison and antidote warred within him. Brutus fought toward them, his blade seeking Caesar's heart. But Lydia stepped between them. "You studied in China to save Rome," she said, "but you learned only how to destroy." Brutus's eyes were wild. Rome must be free of tyrants. "And yet," Lydia replied, "you became one yourself." The battle in the Senate House was brief but vicious. Brutus's liberators, exposed by Valentina's powder, found themselves outnumbered by loyal guards. Brutus himself fought with desperate fury, his carefully laid plans crumbling around him. But it was his philosophical certainty that proved his undoing. He paused to deliver a speech about tyranny while Marcus's sword found his shoulder. As Brutus fell, bleeding, he looked at Caesar with something between hatred and sorrow. "You were meant to be different," he whispered. "You were meant to be great." Caesar, supported by Lydia and Mei Ling, looked down at his adopted son. "Greatness isn't taken, Brutus. It's earned through service." The poison's effects were subsiding, the antidote working, but Caesar would need days of treatment to fully recover. As guards arrested the conspirators, Valentina approached the wounded Brutus. "Your formula was brilliant," she admitted. "But you forgot that poisons are like people. They can be turned against their masters." Brutus laughed bitterly, blood on his lips. "I learned everything from the East except wisdom." He looked at Mei Ling. "Your father tried to warn me. He said power was the ultimate poison, more dangerous than any herb or mineral." The Senate House began to empty, leaving only the key players. Caesar turned to Lydia. "You've saved Rome from a shadow war, but this won't be the end. Where there's power, there will always be those who seek shortcuts to claim it." Lydia nodded, exhausted but victorious. "Then we must be vigilant. Knowledge itself is neither good nor evil. It's how we choose to use it." 3 days after the failed assassination, Caesar summoned his saviors to a private celebration. The gathering was small, just Caesar, Calpurnia, and the 4 who had prevented catastrophe. The dictator looked healthier, though still pale from his ordeal. "Rome owes you all a debt," he began, raising his cup. "But Rome cannot know the full truth. The people need faith in their institutions, not fear of invisible poisons." He turned to Valentina first. "Your shop will be rebuilt, your reputation restored. I name you official perfumer to the imperial household, but your true role will be protecting Rome from chemical threats." Valentina bowed deeply, understanding both the honor and the warning implicit in the appointment. To Mei Ling, Caesar offered freedom and citizenship. "Your knowledge saved my life. Will you stay and establish a school of Eastern medicine in Rome?" The young woman accepted graciously, seeing an opportunity to honor her father's memory. Marcus received promotion to Caesar's personal guard, his loyalty proven beyond doubt. But it was to Lydia that Caesar offered the most significant position. Rome needs a new kind of defender, someone who understands that future wars might be fought with powders and potions rather than swords. "Will you lead this effort?" Lydia considered carefully. "On one condition, that we also use this knowledge for healing. The same substances that kill can cure if we have wisdom to guide us." Caesar smiled. "Spoken like a true physician. Very well. You'll have resources, authority, and most importantly, purpose." The new laboratory Caesar provided surpassed anything Lydia had imagined. Located in a secure wing of the palace, it combined Greek medical knowledge, Roman engineering, and Eastern alchemical wisdom. Mei Ling helped organize the Chinese texts they'd acquired from Brutus's abandoned quarters. Years of research into immortality elixirs and consciousness-altering substances. "Look at this," Mei Ling said, showing Lydia a scroll. Brutus was investigating the emperor's mercury pills. He thought they granted eternal life, not knowing they slowly drove the emperors mad. Valentina arrived with her salvaged equipment and formulas. Despite their rocky beginning, she and Lydia had developed mutual respect. "I've been thinking about what Brutus said," Valentina mused, "about power being the ultimate poison. Perhaps our role isn't just to stop poisoners, but to understand why people seek such desperate measures for control." Marcus, now a regular visitor, brought intelligence from the streets. "There are rumors of other groups interested in your work. Parthian spies, Egyptian priests, even Jewish zealots seeking weapons against Rome." Lydia realized their victory over Brutus was just the beginning. The knowledge of chemical warfare once released couldn't be contained. "Then we must be the guardians of this knowledge," she declared. "We'll document everything, not just the formulas, but their counters. Future generations need to know both the poison and the cure." As spring arrived in Rome, their work had already prevented 3 more poisoning attempts. The shadow war Brutus had started continued, but now Rome had defenders who fought in its darkness. Summer brought an unexpected visitor, a Persian merchant named Darius, who claimed to have information about a poisoning plot in the eastern provinces. But Lydia sensed deception in his honeyed words. His knowledge of their work was too precise, his arrival too convenient. She tested him by showing false formulas, watching his reactions. When he eagerly copied a deliberately flawed antidote recipe, her suspicions were confirmed. Marcus arrested him that night, finding Parthian gold and coded messages in his quarters. Under interrogation, Darius revealed a chilling truth. Brutus had sent formulas to multiple foreign courts before his capture, selling Roman secrets to fund his conspiracy. "The knowledge has spread like plague," Darius admitted. "Every power from Carthage to Ctesiphon now seeks to master these arts." Mei Ling was particularly disturbed. If the Parthians combine Brutus's formulas with their own ancient knowledge of poisons, they could create weapons we can't counter. Caesar, informed of this development, made a strategic decision. We need allies who understand this threat. Send envoys to the Han court, to the kingdoms of India, even to the Druids of Britannia. This shadow war has become global. Lydia found herself appointed as Rome's first ambassador of medical defense, tasked with building an international network against chemical warfare. It was a role that would have seemed impossible just months ago, yet now felt like destiny. The girl who had ground beetles in Athens now stood at the center of an intelligence web spanning the known world. The Han ambassador arrived in autumn, accompanied by an entourage that included physicians, alchemists, and surprisingly, Mei Ling's uncle, a high-ranking official who had searched for her since her father's death. The reunion was emotional but brief. There was work to do. Ambassador Chen presented gifts, rare texts on Chinese medicine, samples of herbs unknown to Rome, and most importantly, a treaty proposal. The Middle Kingdom recognizes the threat, Chen explained through Mei Ling's translation. We propose an exchange, our knowledge of antidotes for your discoveries about Western poisons. Caesar personally attended the negotiations, understanding their importance. This alliance could reshape the balance of power, he told Lydia privately, not through conquest, but through knowledge. The cultural exchange proved challenging. Chinese concepts of qi and balance seemed mystical to Roman minds, while Roman emphasis on anatomy puzzled the Eastern physicians. But Lydia found common ground in their shared goal, protecting humanity from those who would weaponize nature's power. During one late-night session, Chen's physician demonstrated acupuncture on a volunteer soldier who suffered from chronic pain. When the needles not only eased his pain, but also neutralized a mild poison they'd administered as a test, even skeptical Romans were impressed. Your needles affect the body's rivers of energy, the physician explained. Poison is simply wrong energy. Redirect the flow and you redirect the poison. Valentina was particularly intrigued. Could we combine this with our herbal treatments? East and West united against death itself. The partnership yielded unexpected breakthroughs. Chinese knowledge of fungi and Roman understanding of minerals created antidotes neither culture could have developed alone. But success bred new dangers. Marcus intercepted intelligence that a group calling itself the Cult of Thanatos, death worshippers, sought to steal their research. They believe the apocalypse approaches, Marcus reported. They want to accelerate it using our own discoveries against us. The cult had infiltrated both Roman and Chinese communities in the city. When several Chinese physicians fell mysteriously ill, Lydia recognized the symptoms immediately. They'd been poisoned with their own traditional medicines, corrupted and weaponized. The attack was both practical and symbolic, designed to shatter the new alliance. Working together, Lydia and Chen's physicians developed a treatment, but the message was clear. Their enemies were learning, adapting, evolving. Valentina proposed a radical solution. We're playing defense while they attack. What if we go on the offensive, not with poisons, but with knowledge? Flood the markets with false formulas, incorrect recipes that will backfire on anyone who tries to use them. It was a dangerous gambit. Deliberately spreading misinformation could harm innocents. But Caesar approved a modified version. They would release partial truths, formulas that seemed complete but required secret additional steps to function. Let them steal shadows while we keep the substance, he declared. The Shadow War had evolved into something unprecedented, history's first intelligence operation based on scientific deception. Winter brought disturbing news from the north. Germanic tribes had acquired some of Brutus's formulas and were experimenting on Roman prisoners. The reports were horrifying. Soldiers found dead with their faces frozen in rictuses of artificial ecstasy. Their hearts burst from chemically induced passion. Caesar called an emergency council. This has gone too far. We created defenses against assassination, but now we face weapons of war. Lydia proposed a desperate measure, traveling to Germania to negotiate directly with the tribal chiefs. They don't understand what they're playing with. These formulas, used incorrectly, could poison their own people through contaminated water and soil. Marcus volunteered to accompany her, along with Mei-Ling and, surprisingly, Valentina. "I helped create this problem," the former poisoner said. "Let me help solve it." The journey north was treacherous, through winter forests, where every shadow might hide an enemy. They travelled disguised as merchants, their real cargo hidden, antidotes and educational scrolls translated into Germanic runes. When they finally reached the tribal stronghold, they found a situation worse than imagined. The Germans hadn't just acquired formulas. They'd captured one of Brutus's apprentices, a young Roman named Lucius, who was teaching them mass production methods. The meeting with Chief Arminius would determine whether the Shadow War spread to all of Europa or ended at negotiation tables. Lydia prepared for the most important presentation of her life, convincing warriors that the greatest strength was choosing not to use the ultimate weapon. Chief Arminius was not what Lydia expected. Young, intelligent, and educated, he'd served in the Roman auxiliaries before returning to lead his people. "You come to take away our new power," he said in accented Latin. "Why should we listen?" Lydia demonstrated by having Valentina prepare one of the corrupted formulas the Germans were using. She poured it on a patch of ground where nothing would grow for years. "This is what you're doing to your own land. These aren't weapons. They're curses that will outlive your grandchildren." Lucius, Brutus's apprentice, tried to intervene. "Don't listen to them. They want to keep power for Rome alone." But Mei-Ling revealed something that silenced him. Documents showing that Brutus had planned to test his most dangerous formulas on Germanic villages first, viewing them as expendable subjects. "You were never allies to him," she said quietly. "You were laboratory rats." Arminius's face darkened as he read Brutus's notes. The casual dismissal of Germanic lives, the cold calculations of acceptable casualties. It changed everything. "What do you propose?" he asked finally. Lydia offered a treaty. Rome would share defensive knowledge, antidotes and treatments, if the Germans destroyed their poison stockpiles and surrendered Lucius. "We're not asking you to be defenseless," she explained. "We're offering you protection from a threat that recognizes no borders." The negotiation lasted 3 days, with heated arguments and careful diplomacy. Finally, Arminius agreed, but with a warning. "Other tribes have this knowledge now. Your shadow war has only begun." The return journey to Rome became a flight from death. Someone, whether cult of Thanatos or foreign agents, had learned of their mission and sent assassins. The attacks came in waves: poisoned food at inns, contaminated water sources, even toxic smoke pumped into their rooms at night. Only their combined expertise kept them alive. Valentina identified each poison by scent. Mei-Ling prepared antidotes, Lydia treated symptoms, and Marcus fought off physical assaults. "They're testing us," Valentina observed after surviving the 5th attempt. "Each poison is different, more sophisticated. Someone's using us as an experiment." The revelation came when they captured an assassin, a woman who carried Chinese needles, Roman herbs, and Egyptian toxins. Under interrogation, she revealed the terrifying truth. A new organization had formed from the remnants of Brutus's network, calling itself the Synthesis. "We take the best from every tradition," she boasted. Greek logic, Roman ambition, Chinese subtlety, Egyptian mysticism. We are evolution itself. The Synthesis wasn't just another cult. It was an international conspiracy of brilliant minds, convinced that humanity needed to be purified through selective poisoning. They saw themselves as gardeners, weeding out the weak and unworthy. Reaching Rome's gates felt like escape from nightmare, but Lydia knew they'd only discovered a new threat's existence. The Shadow War had spawned something beyond nations or politics. a philosophical movement that weaponized science itself. Caesar's response to the synthesis threat was unprecedented. He called together representatives from every major power: Rome, Han China, Parthia, Egypt, even Celtic druids and Jewish scholars. The conference convened in a heavily guarded villa outside Rome, with Lydia serving as chief advisor. "We face an enemy without nation or banner," Caesar addressed the assembly. "They recruit from among our own brightest minds, corrupt our greatest discoveries. Traditional warfare cannot defeat an idea." The Egyptian priest-physician Amenhotep spoke first. "In Memphis, 3 of our sacred healers vanished last month. They took with them knowledge of preservation, mummification chemicals that, modified, could preserve poison in the body for weeks before activation." The Parthian ambassador added grimly, "Our fire temples report thefts of sacred substances. Someone seeks to weaponize every tradition's most guarded secrets." Over the following days, a pattern emerged. The synthesis recruited those who felt betrayed by their societies. Brilliant minds denied recognition. Healers whose patients died despite their best efforts. Philosophers who believed humanity was failing its potential. Mei Ling made a crucial observation. They prey on pride and disappointment. Every culture has these vulnerable individuals. The conference resulted in an unprecedented agreement, the Treaty of Shadows. All participating nations would share information about poison threats, establish rapid communication networks, and most importantly, create an international force of medical defenders. Lydia found herself appointed as the first coordinator of this force, a position that would have been unimaginable for a Greek woman just a year ago. The first test of the international alliance came sooner than expected. A merchant ship arrived in Ostia with its entire crew dead, their bodies showing signs of multiple poisoning methods. A synthesis signature. But one sailor had survived long enough to write a message in his own blood. Cyprus. Temple. New dawn. Lydia assembled a strike team combining talents from the alliance: Roman soldiers, Chinese alchemists, an Egyptian priest, and a Celtic druid who claimed to sense poison through the earth itself. Valentina insisted on joining, her insider knowledge invaluable. Cyprus revealed horrors beyond imagination. The synthesis had converted an abandoned temple of Aphrodite into a laboratory where they tested combinations of international poisons on kidnapped victims. The walls were lined with detailed notes on each death, clinical, emotionless documentation of suffering. But worse was what they found in the inner sanctum. Children being trained as perfect poisoners, their minds shaped from youth to see death as art. The raid was swift and decisive, but the leader escaped, leaving behind only a note: "You stop one temple while we birth 100. Evolution cannot be stopped." Among the rescued children was a girl named Julia, no more than 12, who knew more about poisons than most master physicians. "They taught us that we were special," she said hollowly, "that we would create a new world where only the worthy survived." Lydia faced an ethical dilemma. These children were both victims and weapons. How could they be rehabilitated when murder had been encoded into their education? The rehabilitation of the synthesis children became Lydia's most challenging project. Julia, the most advanced of them, possessed knowledge that could kill hundreds, but had never learned empathy or moral choice. "Why is death wrong if it serves a purpose?" Julia asked during one session. "You kill animals for food, enemies for safety. We were taught to kill the weak for evolution." Lydia tried a different approach, showing Julia how the same knowledge could heal. They worked together in the medical ward, treating patients with formulas that, slightly modified, could kill. "Power isn't in taking life," Lydia explained. "It's in preserving it against all odds." Slowly, Julia began to understand. When she successfully treated a child dying from accidental poisoning, using the very knowledge meant for murder. Something changed in her eyes. "I gave life," she whispered, amazed. Meanwhile, intelligence arrived about the synthesis leader, a figure known only as the architect. Rumors placed him as a former student of multiple traditions, someone who had studied in Alexandria, trained in hand courts, learned from Indian yogis, and consulted with northern shamans. Valentina believed she knew his identity. "There was a man who came to me years ago, before Brutus. He wanted to learn everything, but offered nothing in return. When I refused, he said something chilling. Knowledge hoarded is knowledge wasted. One day, all secrets will be free." His name was Cassius, and he had been Brutus's teacher before betraying him to create his own vision of transformation. Spring brought a diplomatic crisis. The Parthian Empire accused Rome of breaking the Treaty of Shadows, claiming Roman agents had poisoned their crown prince. Caesar convened an emergency council, with Lydia leading the investigation. The evidence was damning. The prince had died from a distinctly Roman combination of herbs, and witnesses placed a Roman merchant near the palace days before. But Lydia noticed inconsistencies. The poison formula was too perfect, too textbook, like someone had copied it from a manual rather than understanding its subtleties. "This is the synthesis," she declared. "They're trying to shatter our alliance by framing Rome." Mei Ling discovered the crucial proof: microscopic residue on the poison vial that contained a fungus found only in northern India, nowhere near Roman territories. The real killer had tried too hard to make it look Roman and revealed their deception. The Parthian ambassador was convinced but troubled. If they can nearly provoke war between empires, what else can they accomplish? Caesar made a bold decision. We need to go public. Not about everything, but enough to warn people. Let citizens know that poisoners walk among them, that vigilance is required. The announcement caused panic initially, but also unexpected unity. Citizens began reporting suspicious activities, creating an informal intelligence network. Markets implemented poison testing protocols. The shadow war was becoming everyone's war, but the architect responded with a manifesto distributed throughout the empire. "We are not your enemy. We are your evolution. Those who survive us were meant to inherit the earth." The public revelation changed everything. Lydia could no longer walk the streets without recognition. Some saw her as a savior, others as a harbinger of paranoid times. The medical school she'd established was flooded with applicants, everyone wanting to learn protection against the invisible threat. Julia had become her most promising student. Her dark past transformed into determination to save lives. "I know how they think," she told Lydia. "The synthesis teaches that emotion is weakness. But now I see its strength. Caring makes us fight harder." An unexpected ally emerged from the Senate. Cicero, the great orator, who saw the shadow war as a philosophical battle. "This architect preaches evolution through murder," he declared in a thundering speech. "But true evolution comes through education, through lifting all humanity, not culling it like diseased wheat." His words sparked a movement. Schools across the empire began teaching basic poison recognition. Mothers learned which plants could harm their children. Merchants established guilds to verify the safety of traded goods. But the synthesis adapted too. They began recruiting differently, targeting the desperate rather than the brilliant. People who had nothing to lose and would do anything for coin. The shadow war was democratizing in the worst way possible. Valentina, now fully committed to the alliance, made a chilling prediction. The architect isn't trying to win through individual assassinations anymore. He's building towards something massive, a demonstration that will prove his philosophy to the world. The assassination attempt on Caesar during the Summer Games was audacious even by synthesis standards. As thousands watched gladiatorial combat, Multiple poisoners had infiltrated the crowd, each carrying components of a gaseous toxin that, when combined, would kill everyone in the Colosseum's imperial box. Only Julia's reformed insight saved them. She recognized the positioning pattern, how synthesis agents would distribute themselves for maximum effect. There, she pointed, and there. They're forming a chemical triangle. Marcus coordinated the arrests with precision, but one poisoner released their component before capture. The partial gas caused panic, but no deaths, though several senators experienced hallucinations that revealed embarrassing secrets. The captured agents were young, desperate, and knew little beyond their specific tasks. But one carried something valuable, a partial map showing synthesis cells across the empire. The network was vast, reaching from Britannia to Egypt. We need to strike simultaneously, Marcus strategized. Hit every cell at once, or they'll scatter like mercury. The operation would require unprecedented coordination between Rome, Han China, Parthia, and every allied power. As Lydia planned with international commanders, she received a personal message from the architect himself. Dear Lydia, you've played beautifully, but the game approaches its end. Meet me at the place where Alexander sought immortality, and I'll show you why resistance is futile. It was a trap, certainly, but also perhaps the only chance to end the Shadow War before it consumed the world. The oracle at Siwa, where Alexander had once sought confirmation of his divinity, stood isolated in the Egyptian desert. Lydia arrived with a small team: Marcus, Valentina, Mei Ling, and surprisingly, Julia, who insisted her insight into synthesis thinking was crucial. The temple complex seemed abandoned, but Lydia sensed the trap's presence like a physical weight. They entered cautiously, finding the outer chambers filled with ancient inscriptions about immortality and fresh editions in multiple languages describing the architect's philosophy. Finally, in the inner sanctum, they found him. Cassius, the architect, was older than expected, perhaps 60, with eyes that held terrible brilliance. "Welcome to the birthplace of delusion," he said calmly, "where Alexander believed he was a god, where I learned that gods are simply those who survive." Around him were arranged dozens of vials, each labeled with a different city's name. "Every major population center in the known world," he explained. "My followers await my signal. If I die here, they release everything. If you try to stop me, they release everything. The only way to prevent mass death is to listen." It was the ultimate hostage situation. Entire cities held ransom to force an audience. Lydia had no choice but to hear him out. "Humanity stagnates," Cassius began. "We've grown soft, weak, dependent on civilization's comfort. My way, selection through trial, would create a stronger species. Those who survive would be immune to poisons, resistant to disease, mentally sharper. Evolution accelerated by conscious choice rather than random chance." "You're not describing evolution," Lydia countered. "You're describing genocide dressed in philosophical robes." Cassius smiled. "Every advance in human history required sacrifice. Fire burned many before we mastered it. Agriculture starved populations during failed experiments. Progress demands blood." Mei Ling spoke up. "In China, we have a saying, the farmer who burns his field for fertile ash loses both grain and soil. You would destroy the very diversity that makes humanity strong." But Cassius had anticipated every argument. He showed them scrolls documenting genetic weaknesses in royal bloodlines, plagues that decimated unprepared populations, the slow decline of once great civilizations. "I offer controlled catastrophe instead of random annihilation," he insisted. Julia stepped forward unexpectedly. "I was your perfect student once. I believed everything you teach, but you're wrong about one thing. Strength doesn't come from surviving poison. It comes from choosing not to use it. She revealed a vial of her own. This is the ultimate antidote, effective against every poison you've created. I developed it using your own teachings against you. Cassius's composure cracked slightly. Impossible. The chemical interactions alone are solvable when you stop thinking like a killer and start thinking like a healer, Julia said. She demonstrated by drinking from one of his city-labeled vials, then taking her antidote. She survived, proving her point. The game had changed. Cassius's ultimate threat was undermined by his own former student. But he still held the trigger to worldwide catastrophe, and desperation made him more dangerous than ever.
The standoff stretched through the night. Cassius, realizing his poison threat was neutralized if Julia's antidote could be mass-produced, shifted tactics. You think you've won. The synthesis is more than poisons. We've infiltrated governments, armies, trade guilds. We are everywhere, invisible, waiting. Valentina laughed bitterly. I've heard this before. Brutus thought he was invisible too. But every conspiracy has a weakness: human ambition. Your followers don't share your philosophy. They follow for power, wealth, or revenge. Remove you, and they scatter. Marcus had been silently counting guards, memorizing positions. He signaled Lydia. They were outnumbered, but not impossibly. The real question was whether they could prevent Cassius from sending his activation signal. The solution came from an unexpected source. The Oracle's current priestess, who had been hiding during their confrontation, emerged with ancient temple guards. This sacred place has been defiled by talk of mass murder, she declared. The god Apollo demands justice. The guards were few, but held spiritual authority that even Cassius's followers hesitated to challenge. In that moment of uncertainty, Julia acted. She threw a powder that Mei Ling had prepared. Not poison, but a compound that caused temporary paralysis of voluntary muscles. Cassius and his guards froze, able to breathe, but unable to move or speak. Another lesson you taught me, Julia said. Sometimes the best poison is one that doesn't kill. They had minutes before the paralysis wore off, enough time to destroy the communication devices and neutralize the immediate threat.
With Cassius captured and his doomsday threat neutralized, the international alliance moved against synthesis cells worldwide. The coordinated strikes were remarkably successful. Without their leader's philosophical certainty, most cells surrendered or scattered. But in Rome, unexpected news awaited. Caesar had fallen ill, not from poison, but from the accumulated stress of the shadow war. His body, weakened by the previous assassination attempt, was failing. Ironic, he told Lydia from his sickbed. I survive elaborate poisons only to be killed by time and exhaustion. Lydia treated him with everything she knew, combining Greek medicine, Chinese techniques, and Egyptian remedies. But some battles couldn't be won with knowledge alone. Promise me, Caesar said, that this alliance we've built survives. The shadow war may be ending, but the knowledge we've unleashed can't be contained. Future generations will need guardians. She promised, though she knew the political situation was already shifting. Without Caesar's authority, would the international cooperation continue? Marcus brought disturbing intelligence. Some synthesis members had escaped the raids, including several who knew Julia's antidote formula. They'll try to counter it, he warned. Create new poisons that bypass the universal protection. Mei Ling suggested a radical solution. We publish everything. Every poison, every antidote, every technique. If everyone has the knowledge, no one can monopolize it for evil. It was dangerous. Making such information public could enable countless criminals. But perhaps transparency was the only defense against future shadow wars. Caesar's funeral became an unexpected celebration of the international alliance. Representatives from every participating nation attended, their combined presence a powerful symbol of unity against the shadow threat. Lydia delivered a eulogy that surprised many by focusing not on Caesar's military conquests, but on his vision of knowledge as humanity's true strength. He understood that the greatest empire isn't built on land, but on learning, she said. His last victory wasn't won with swords, but with wisdom. The power vacuum in Rome created immediate tensions. Mark Antony sought to militarize the anti-poison initiatives, while Octavian favored maintaining the scholarly approach. Cicero argued for complete transparency, supporting Mei Ling's radical proposal. During the political debates, Julia made a shocking discovery in Cassius's confiscated documents. The synthesis had been developing something beyond poisons. They'd been experimenting with beneficial compounds, substances that could enhance human capabilities without killing. It's like they were playing both sides, she explained to Lydia, creating problems and solutions simultaneously. But why? Valentina understood immediately. Control. If you hold both poison and cure, disease and health, weakness and strength, you become indispensable to all sides. The revelation suggested the Shadow War had been even more complex than they'd imagined. The synthesis hadn't just wanted to cull humanity. They'd wanted to control its evolution in every direction. This knowledge presented a new dilemma. Should they destroy this research or study it for potential benefits? The establishment of the International Academy of Medical Defense marked a turning point in the Shadow War's aftermath. Located on neutral ground in Rhodes, it would train physicians from every nation in both the healing and harmful properties of nature's arsenal. Lydia was appointed as its first director, with Mei Ling, Valentina, and even reformed synthesis members like Julia as instructors. We're not just teaching medicine, Lydia explained at the opening ceremony. We're fostering understanding between cultures, creating bonds that transcend politics. The Academy's first class included students from places as distant as Britannia and India. Each brought their own traditions, creating an unprecedented exchange of knowledge. But challenges arose immediately. An Indian student's use of cobra venom in healing conflicted with Egyptian prohibitions. Celtic druids insisted their oral traditions couldn't be written down. Chinese alchemists worried about revealing imperial secrets. Julia proposed a solution: compartmentalized learning. Not everyone needs to know everything. We teach defense universally, but restrict the most dangerous knowledge to those who prove their ethical commitment. The system wasn't perfect, but it balanced transparency with security. Students would spend years earning the right to learn civilization-ending formulas, by which time they'd hopefully developed the wisdom not to use them. Meanwhile, disturbing reports arrived from the Far East. Someone was recreating synthesis experiments in kingdoms beyond China, areas the Alliance couldn't easily reach. The Shadow War might be over in the Mediterranean, but it was spreading to new frontiers. The crisis came from within. A brilliant Egyptian student named Kenti, grandson of a pharaoh's physician, challenged the Academy's fundamental premise during a public debate. "You claim to protect humanity," he argued, "but you're actually perpetuating the problem. By teaching defense against poisons, you ensure poisons will always exist. The only true solution is to destroy all knowledge of toxins, returning to ignorance for the sake of innocence." His words resonated with many who were exhausted by the constant vigilance the Shadow War had created. Citizens' groups formed demanding the Academy's closure, the burning of all poisoned texts, a return to simpler times. Lydia faced the challenge head-on in a public forum. Ignorance isn't innocence, it's vulnerability. The knowledge exists whether we acknowledge it or not. Plants don't become less toxic, because we forget their properties. But educated people can choose not to use them harmfully. The debate raged across the empire. Cicero supported the academy with powerful speeches about knowledge as light against darkness. But opposition grew, especially among those who'd lost family to poisonings. The situation exploded when Kenty was found dead in his room, apparently poisoned. His supporters blamed the academy, claiming he'd been silenced for speaking truth. But Lydia's investigation revealed something different. Kenty had poisoned himself with a formula from pre-academy texts, trying to become a martyr for his cause. His final note read, "Let my death prove that this knowledge only brings death." The tragedy forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the price of wisdom. Kenty's death transformed Julia in unexpected ways. Having once been indoctrinated into seeing death as art, she now faced someone who'd chosen death as argument. She requested permission to address the academy, and her speech became legendary. "I was raised to worship death," she began, her young voice carrying surprising authority. "The synthesis taught me that killing was evolution, that poison was progress, but Kenty's death proves the opposite. It's the ultimate surrender, the final failure of imagination." She continued, "Knowledge of poison isn't the problem. The problem is when we see it as the only solution. Every toxin I learn to deploy can also teach us about life, how bodies work, how to heal, how to understand nature's complexity." Her words swayed many doubters, especially when she demonstrated how poison knowledge had led to breakthrough medicines. A compound derived from toxic fungi now treated previously fatal infections. Venom from serpents was being used to stop excessive bleeding. Meanwhile, Valentina had been investigating the Eastern reports. She returned with troubling news. It's not the synthesis reborn. It's something older, a tradition that predates even Alexander's conquest. They call themselves the Eternal Gardeners, and they've been selectively poisoning bloodlines for centuries, claiming to guide human evolution. This revelation recontextualized everything. The synthesis hadn't been an innovation but a rediscovery of ancient practices. The shadow war they'd fought was just one battle in a conflict spanning millennia. The Eternal Gardeners sent an emissary, an ancient woman named Priya, who claimed to be over 90, yet moved with uncanny grace. She arrived at the academy, requesting formal dialogue, accompanied by servants carrying gifts of rare texts and unknown substances. "We have watched your shadow war with interest," she told the assembled council. "You fight against what we have practiced for 3,000 years. Perhaps it's time you understood why." Her explanation was chilling in its logic. The gardeners believed humanity faced inevitable catastrophes, plagues, famines, wars, that would destroy civilization unless the species was prepared through controlled exposure to hardships. "We don't kill randomly," Priya explained. "We remove genetic weaknesses, eliminate bloodlines prone to madness or disease. Every death serves the garden's growth." Mei Ling challenged her immediately. "You speak of humans like crops to be cultivated. But we're not plants. We have consciousness, choice, love. Your philosophy denies what makes us human." Priya smiled. "And yet consciousness evolved from unconscious matter, choice from determinism, love from chemical reactions. We simply accelerate natural processes." The debate lasted days, with scholars from every tradition participating. The gardeners' knowledge was undeniably vast. They possessed formulas lost since Babylon, understood genetic principles that wouldn't be discovered for centuries. But their willingness to apply this knowledge without consent remained abhorrent to most. Lydia finally asked the crucial question, "What do you want from us?" Priya's answer was unexpected. Partnership. "The world grows too complex for our ancient methods. We offer our knowledge in exchange for your networks. Together, we could guide humanity through the coming darkness." The vote on Priya's proposal split the academy. Some saw the gardener's knowledge as too valuable to refuse, while others viewed any association as betraying everything they'd fought against. Julia cast the deciding vote, surprising everyone with her reasoning. "We accept the knowledge but reject the philosophy," she declared. "Learn from them, as we learned from the synthesis. Take what serves life, leave what serves death." The collaboration was uneasy but productive. Gardner texts revealed antidotes to plagues that would sweep through Europe centuries later. Their understanding of inherited traits revolutionized medicine. But every gain came with ethical weight. Marcus, now security chief of the Academy, discovered Gardner agents secretly testing Academy students, identifying those worthy of advanced knowledge. "They're still selecting," he warned Lydia, "just more subtly." The confrontation with Priya was tense. "Old habits," she apologized insincerely. "We've guided humanity for so long, it's difficult to stop." Lydia made the stakes clear. "Continue your tests, and we publish everything. Your identities, locations, methods. The gardener's secrecy ends." It was a powerful threat. The gardener's effectiveness depended on working from shadows. Exposure would destroy millennia of careful cultivation. Priya agreed to restrictions, but her parting words were ominous. "You may force our hand today, but time favors patience. We were here before your Rome, your China, your Egypt. We will remain when all empires are dust, and humanity will need us, whether they know it or not." 5 years had passed since the Shadow War's end. The Academy had graduated its first class, sending trained defenders back to their homelands. Some became royal physicians, others established schools, and a few vanished into intelligence work. Lydia, now in her 40s, had seen the world change dramatically. International trade routes carried not just goods, but medical knowledge. Poison attacks had decreased dramatically as detection methods improved. The Shadow War's legacy was paradoxically a safer world. But new challenges emerged. A message arrived from the far north. Viking raiders had discovered poison weapons and were using them in coastal attacks. The knowledge was spreading beyond civilization's boundaries, reaching peoples the Alliance had never considered. "We created a cascade," Valentina observed. She'd aged gracefully, her poison-making days long behind her, replaced by teaching and research. Knowledge wants to spread like water, finding every crack. Julia, now a master instructor herself, proposed a radical solution. "We go to them. Every culture, every people, no matter how remote. We teach defense before they learn offense." It was an ambitious plan requiring resources beyond the Academy's means. But unexpected support came from reformed synthesis members who'd built successful businesses, using their chemical knowledge for legitimate purposes. They funded expeditions to the edges of the known world. Mei Ling led the mission to the Vikings, bringing medicines that proved more valuable than gold to the harsh northern peoples. In exchange for healing knowledge, the raiders agreed to abandon poison weapons. The Shadow War was evolving into something unprecedented, a peaceful conquest through medical diplomacy. The Viking mission's success inspired similar expeditions. Academy teams traveled to Africa's interior, India's remote kingdoms, and islands beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Each journey brought back new knowledge, poisons unknown to classical civilization and their corresponding cures. But in Rome, political changes threatened the Academy's support. Octavian, now Augustus, questioned the expense of maintaining international cooperation. "Rome is supreme," he declared. "Why should we share advantages with potential enemies?" Lydia met with him privately, reminding him of Caesar's vision. "Your uncle understood that knowledge hoarded becomes knowledge weaponized against you. Our openness is our strength." Augustus was unconvinced until an incident proved her point. A Roman legion in Gaul was saved from mass poisoning Because Germanic tribes, trained by the academy, recognized the threat and provided antidotes. Former enemies had become protectors through shared knowledge. The story spread throughout Rome, rebuilding public support. Augustus reluctantly continued funding, but with conditions. Rome must always maintain an advantage. Some knowledge remains ours alone. It was a compromise that troubled Lydia but perhaps reflected reality. Perfect international cooperation was an ideal. Practical politics required some secrecy. She established a classified archive. Formulas too dangerous for general knowledge, accessible only to those who'd proven their commitment to humanity's welfare. The Shadow War's greatest lesson was that absolute positions, whether total secrecy or complete transparency, were equally dangerous. Wisdom lay in balance. An unexpected visitor arrived at the academy. Cassius, the former architect, now aged and seeking redemption. He'd spent years in prison, contemplating his actions, and his request was simple. Let him teach what he knew before he died. I was wrong about forcing evolution, he admitted to Lydia. But my knowledge shouldn't die with me. There are formulas, techniques, understandings that could serve humanity if properly applied. The proposal caused uproar. Many couldn't forgive his attempted genocide, but Julia, surprisingly, supported him. I was shaped by his teachings into a weapon, then reshaped myself into a healer. Perhaps he can do the same. The compromise was strict supervision. Cassius would document his knowledge but never teach directly. Every formula would be reviewed for safety and ethical application. His work revealed disturbing depths. He developed compounds that could alter consciousness, enhance memory, even slow aging. I sought to make humanity better through selection, he explained. But these could make individuals better through enhancement. The ethical implications were staggering. Should humans artificially improve themselves? Where was the line between medicine and modification? These questions sparked debates that raged through the academy. Some saw enhancement as evolution's next step. Others viewed it as betraying human nature. Lydia found herself mediating between extremes, seeking a path that honored human dignity while not rejecting beneficial progress. The Shadow War had ended, but its philosophical battles continued. Character appearance. Cassius aged and humbled in simple prisoner's robes, Julia adult and authoritative, academy members divided in their reactions. The discovery came from combining traditions, Chinese longevity practices, Egyptian preservation techniques, and Cassius's enhancement formulas yielded something unprecedented, a compound that could extend human life by decades. The implications shattered every assumption about mortality, power, and society. We can't release this, Marcus argued in emergency council. Imagine emperors living for centuries, accumulating power, or worse, only the wealthy accessing it while the poor die naturally. Mei Ling agreed, but for different reasons. In China, we have stories of immortals who became monsters, losing their humanity through endless years. Some gifts are curses. But Valentina posed a counter-argument. We're scholars, not gods. Who are we to decide humanity's lifespan? If we can extend life, don't we have an obligation to do so? The debate paralyzed the academy for months. Meanwhile, rumors of the discovery leaked. Powerful figures across the world sent representatives offering anything: gold, territories, alliances, for access to the formula. Priya and the Eternal Gardeners emerged from their shadows, claiming ancient rights to the knowledge. We've guarded similar secrets for millennia, she said. We know the burden of choosing who lives longer. It's not a decision for young civilizations. The pressure mounted from all sides. Some nations threatened to withdraw from the alliance if denied access. Others threatened war if anyone else received it. The life extension formula was becoming the seed of a new shadow war, potentially more devastating than the first. The solution came from Julia, whose unique perspective, raised as a weapon, reformed as a healer, offered clarity. "We're thinking about this wrong," she announced. "The question isn't whether to release the formula, but how to prevent its weaponization." Her proposal was radical. Release a modified version that required continuous treatment, not a single transformation. Make it like food or water, necessary regularly, impossible to hoard. If everyone needs it equally, it can't become a tool of oppression. The modification took months, combining expertise from every tradition. The final formula extended life, but required monthly doses prepared fresh from common ingredients. No one could monopolize it because the active compound degraded within days of preparation. "It democratizes longevity," Lydia explained to the assembly. "Rich or poor, emperor or farmer, everyone has equal access to time." The release was coordinated globally, with academy graduates teaching preparation methods in every major city. The social disruption was significant but manageable. People adapted to longer lives as they'd adapted to other changes. But Cassius, observing from his supervised quarters, made a chilling observation. "You've given humanity longer to make the same mistakes. Without wisdom, extended life just means extended folly." His words proved prophetic when reports arrived of criminals using extended lifespans to perfect their crimes, of tyrants maintaining power for unprecedented lengths. The gift of time, like all gifts, could be corrupted. The Academy faced a new mission, teaching not just how to live longer, but how to live better. 10 years had passed since the life extension formula's release. Society had transformed in unexpected ways. Marriage contracts now included century-long terms with renewal options. Apprenticeships lasted decades. The accumulated wisdom of extended lives was revolutionizing every field. But darkness grew alongside light. A new organization called the Finite Brotherhood opposed life extension, viewing death as sacred. They began poisoning water supplies with compounds that neutralized the longevity treatment, forcing people to face natural mortality. Their leader, a former academy student named Demetrius, had been Kenti's closest friend. "You've stolen death's dignity," he declared in manifestos distributed across the empire. "Without ending, life has no meaning." The Brotherhood's attacks were precisely targeted. They seemed to know exactly where and when longevity treatments were distributed. Someone inside the academy was feeding them information. Lydia, now in her 70s, but appearing decades younger thanks to the treatment, led the investigation personally. The traitor's identity shocked everyone. It was one of the original Chinese physicians who'd helped develop the formula. "I've seen what immortality does to wisdom," he explained after capture. "The old become rigid, unable to change. Progress requires death to clear the path for new ideas." His betrayal raised uncomfortable questions. Was he wrong? Already, some extended life individuals showed signs of mental calcification, becoming living fossils of outdated thinking. The Academy faced a paradox. They'd solved mortality, but perhaps created a worse problem: intellectual immortality. The crisis deepened when several nations announced withdrawal from the Academy alliance. They'd gained what they wanted: poison defense and life extension, and saw no further benefit in cooperation. The Shadow War's unity was fracturing along old political lines. Augustus, himself using the longevity treatment, summoned Lydia. "Perhaps it's time for Rome to reclaim its advantages," he suggested. "The Academy has served its purpose. Let each nation guard its own secrets now." Lydia recognized the pattern. The same thinking that had enabled the original Shadow War. "Those who forget history are condemned to repeat it," she warned. "And with extended lives, we'll repeat it for centuries." An emergency gathering brought together the Academy's founders: Lydia, Mei Ling, Valentina, Marcus, and Julia. Even Cassius was permitted to attend under guard. his insights still valuable despite his crimes. "We're at a crossroads," Lydia began. "Do we force unity through strength, accept dissolution through weakness, or find a third path?" Julia proposed something unprecedented. We evolve. The Academy has been defensive, reactive. What if we became proactive? Not just preventing poison, but actively improving human potential. Valentina understood immediately. Enhancement research, not forced evolution like the synthesis wanted, but voluntary improvement. Give people reasons to cooperate beyond fear. The proposal was controversial but compelling. If the Academy could offer cognitive enhancement, disease immunity, even emotional stability, nations would compete to remain allied rather than risk isolation. It meant venturing into dangerous territory, playing with human nature itself. But perhaps that was always their destiny. The enhancement program launched quietly, testing voluntary improvements on willing subjects, starting with the founders themselves. Mei Ling underwent cognitive enhancement, finding her already sharp mind expanded to hold multiple complex thoughts simultaneously. Marcus received physical augmentation, his aging soldier's body renewed beyond mere youth. Valentina chose sensory enhancement, able to detect and analyze substances at molecular levels. But every improvement came with costs. Mei Ling struggled with overwhelming information flow. Marcus found his enhanced strength difficult to control. Valentina became hypersensitive to everyday stimuli. "We're learning what the gardeners knew," Priya observed, having become an unexpected ally. Every change cascades through the system, enhance one aspect, and others must adapt or break. Julia volunteered for the most dangerous experiment, emotional enhancement designed to increase empathy and understanding. The treatment worked too well. She became paralyzed by feeling everyone's pain, unable to function from overwhelming compassion. The reversal process took weeks and nearly killed her. "I understood everything," she whispered during recovery. "Every cruelty, every kindness, every fear and hope. It was beautiful and terrible. No human should hold that much truth." These failures taught valuable lessons. Enhancement couldn't be rushed or forced. Like the Shadow War itself, progress required patience, wisdom, and acceptance of limits. Cassius, observing from his quarters, offered unexpected wisdom. "I sought to make gods of humans. You're learning we're meant to remain beautifully, terribly mortal, even with extended time." The finite brotherhood struck during the Academy's moment of vulnerability. While the founders recovered from enhancement experiments, Demetrius led a coordinated assault on longevity treatment facilities worldwide. But this wasn't random destruction. They developed a counter-formula that didn't just neutralize life extension, but accelerated aging. Victims aged decades in hours, their extended years collecting like a debt. The horror was unprecedented. People who'd lived peacefully for a century suddenly facing rapid dissolution. Marcus, despite his enhancement complications, led the Academy's defense. His augmented strength proved crucial in protecting facilities, but he couldn't be everywhere. Cities panicked as citizens feared both losing longevity and accelerated aging. Lydia worked desperately on an antidote, but the Brotherhood's formula was sophisticated, clearly developed by someone with deep Academy knowledge. The second traitor revealed themselves voluntarily, Kenti's sister, Nefertiti, who'd infiltrated the Academy, seeking revenge for her brother's death. "You drove him to suicide with your poison worship," she accused. "Now you'll watch your life extension paradise crumble." But her confession came with a proposition: abandon the enhancement program, return to natural human limits, and I'll provide the antidote formula. It was blackmail on a civilization scale. Accept human limitations or watch extended lives collapse into accelerated death. The Academy faced an impossible choice: progress or survival. Julia, still recovering from emotional enhancement, provided unexpected insight. She's not wrong about worship. We've made idols of our innovations. Perhaps wisdom means knowing when to stop. The vote was agonizing. Half the Academy wanted to call Nefertiti's bluff, believing they could find the antidote themselves. The other half, led by Julia, argued for accepting limitations. Lydia cast the deciding vote with heavy heart. "We accept," she announced, "but not from defeat, from wisdom." The Shadow War taught us that power without restraint breeds catastrophe. Nefertiti provided the antidote formula, but with a twist. It would save current victims, but make future life extension impossible for them. They would return to natural lifespans, a sacrifice that millions would have to accept. The distribution was chaotic. Some refused the antidote, preferring rapid death to losing extended life. Others embraced it, seeing natural mortality as liberation from an artificial burden. Families split between those who chose centuries and those who chose decades. Cassius observed the crisis with grim satisfaction. "Finally, you understand. Every gift of power demands a price. The synthesis knew this, the gardeners knew this. Now you know it too." But amidst the chaos, unexpected beauty emerged. Those facing natural lifespans began living more intensely, valuing each day. Art flourished as mortality inspired creativity. Love deepened when measured in decades rather than centuries. Mei Ling documented these changes, creating a new philosophy she called sufficient life. The idea that meaning came not from time's quantity, but its quality. Her writings would influence generations, becoming more lasting than any life extension formula. The Academy transformed from a defensive institution to something unprecedented, a wisdom repository where enhancement research continued, but with strict ethical oversight. Every potential improvement underwent years of testing and philosophical scrutiny. The Shadow War's veterans became elder counselors, their experience invaluable in navigating the dangerous territories of human modification. A new generation of students arrived, born after the initial crisis, viewing poisons and enhancement as academic subjects rather than existential threats. Among them was Alexandra, Julia's adopted daughter, a war orphan she'd rescued during the Brotherhood attacks. The girl showed remarkable aptitude for understanding the balance between beneficial and harmful compounds. "Every medicine is poison in the wrong dose," Alexandra would say, echoing teachings absorbed since childhood. "Every poison is medicine waiting to be understood." This philosophy guided the Academy's new direction. Rather than pursuing dramatic enhancements or ultimate weapons, they focused on subtle improvements. Slightly better disease resistance, marginally improved healing, gentle cognitive boosts that didn't overwhelm. Valentina, now ancient by any measure, made a final contribution before retiring. She developed a compound that didn't extend life, but improved its final years, ensuring dignity in aging. "My last formula," she announced, "is acceptance itself, distilled into chemistry." The Eternal Gardeners watched these developments with interest. Priya sent a message. "You're becoming us, slowly but inevitably. The only difference is you're choosing the path rather than having it chosen for you." 25 years after the Shadow War's end, an archaeological discovery in Alexandria's ruins changed everything. Hidden beneath the destroyed library were scrolls predating even the gardeners, documents describing a civilization that had faced the same choices about enhancement, poison, and mortality. The texts, written in a script that combined elements from multiple ancient languages, told of the precedents, humans who'd achieved near perfection through chemical modification, only to vanish mysteriously. Their warnings were explicit. We sought to transcend nature and became unnatural. We conquered death and lost life's meaning. Learn from our absence. Lydia, now truly elderly despite longevity treatments, led the translation effort. The precedents had developed every enhancement the Academy was considering, and many beyond imagination. But their society had collapsed not from external threats, but internal stagnation. They became too perfect, Mailing interpreted. No challenges meant no growth. No death meant no urgency. They didn't die. They simply stopped living. The discovery forced a complete re-evaluation of the Academy's goals. If the path of enhancement led inevitably to civilization's end, what was their purpose? Julia provided the answer. We're not here to perfect humanity, but to protect its imperfection. We guard against those who would force evolution while ensuring natural development continues. This became the Academy's new charter. Not enhancement, but preservation of human potential in all its flawed glory. The final confrontation with the finite brotherhood came unexpectedly. Demetrius, aged and dying naturally as he'd always advocated, requested a meeting with Lydia. They met in neutral ground, the original temple where the Shadow War had begun with Caesar's poisoning. "We're not enemies," he said, surprising her. "We're two sides of the same coin. You preserving life's potential, us preserving death's necessity." He revealed the Brotherhood's true purpose. They weren't destroyers, but balancers, ensuring humanity didn't lose itself to artificial immortality. "Every species needs predators," he explained. "Without us, you'd have no reason to value the life extension you've achieved." It was a disturbing philosophy, but contained truth. The Brotherhood's attacks had forced the Academy to consider enhancement ethics more carefully, to self-limit rather than pursue every possibility. Demetrius made a proposal: formal recognition of the Brotherhood as a legitimate philosophical school, permitted to argue against enhancement but forbidden from violent action. In exchange, they would share their knowledge of natural human limits, information valuable for understanding what shouldn't be changed. Peace between life and death, he offered. Isn't that what the ancient Greeks always sought? Lydia, after consulting the council, agreed. The treaty signed that day was perhaps the strangest in history, an accord between those who would extend life and those who would preserve death. But it brought stability. The Shadow War's final echo faded into philosophical debate rather than violent conflict. Marcus died as he had lived, protecting others. Despite all enhancements and life extensions, a simple accident claimed him. He pushed a child from a falling column's path, taking the blow himself. His enhanced body, so powerful in battle, couldn't survive a crushed spine. His funeral became a testament to the Shadow War's legacy. Warriors, scholars, former enemies, and reformed poisoners gathered to honor the soldier who'd evolved from a fighter to guardian. Julia spoke for all. He proved that strength isn't about the power you wield, but the protection you provide. His death sparked unexpected reflection on enhancement's limits. No modification could eliminate mortality's fundamental randomness. The most enhanced human remained vulnerable to simple accidents, the chaos that defined existence. Cassius, permitted to attend under guard, offered his own eulogy. Marcus understood what I never did. True evolution isn't about surviving, but about serving. He evolved more in his natural humanity than I did in all my forced modifications. The loss devastated the original team. Valentina had already retired. Mei Ling spoke of returning to China, and Lydia felt the weight of outliving companions. But Alexandra and her generation stood ready to continue the work, shaped by the founder's wisdom, but unburdened by their traumas. "Death isn't the enemy," Alexandra said at the memorial. "Forgetting the dead is. Marcus lives on in every life the Academy saves, every poison we prevent, every enhancement we carefully, ethically apply." The revelation came from Alexandra's research into the precedents' texts. Hidden in their chemical formulas was something extraordinary. Not an enhancement, but a communication method. The vanished civilization had encoded their consciousness into molecular structures, preserving not their bodies, but their thoughts. "They didn't die," she announced to the stunned Academy. "They transformed Their knowledge exists in the very compounds we've been studying. The implications were staggering. Every enhancement formula might contain fragments of precedent consciousness. The Academy had been unknowingly carrying forward an ancient civilization's wisdom. Lydia, despite her age, took charge of the investigation. Using techniques combining all their traditions, Greek logic, Chinese alchemy, Egyptian preservation, Roman engineering, they began decoding the molecular messages. What they found changed everything. The precedents hadn't disappeared from stagnation, but from choice. They'd realized that physical perfection was a trap and chose to become pure information, hoping future humans would learn from their transformation. Their message was clear. Enhancement of the body is finite. Enhancement of knowledge is infinite. We failed by choosing flesh over philosophy. Learn from our choice. This discovery reframed the Academy's entire purpose. They weren't just preventing poison or managing enhancement. They were inheritors of an ancient experiment in human potential, tasked with finding the balance the precedents had missed. Cassius died peacefully in his sleep, his final years having transformed him from architect of genocide to philosopher of limitation. His last work, completed days before his death, was titled The Poison of Ambition, a meditation on how the desire for perfection had corrupted every civilization that pursued it. Julia found him, a slight smile on his face, his hand resting on the completed manuscript. He found peace, she told the others. The man who sought to force evolution finally evolved himself, not through chemistry, but through conscience. His funeral was small but significant. Former synthesis members attended, many now respected members of society who'd found redemption through service. Even Nefertiti came, acknowledging that Cassius's transformation proved humans could change fundamentally without chemical enhancement. The manuscript's publication sparked global discussion. Cassius wrote, "I sought to make gods of humans, not understanding we're already divine in our imperfection. Every flaw is a doorway to growth. Every limitation, an invitation to transcendence through acceptance rather than alteration." His words influenced the Academy's final transformation. Rather than pursuing any enhancement, they became guardians of human potential, protecting against those who would force change while nurturing natural development. The Shadow War had begun with poisons hidden as aphrodisiacs. It ended with wisdom disguised as chemistry. The greatest enhancement they'd learned was understanding itself. 50 years had passed since that first morning in Athens, when Lydia ground beetles for a loveless wife. The world had transformed beyond recognition, not through the dramatic enhancements once imagined, but through accumulated wisdom about humanity's potential and limitations. The Academy had evolved into a global network, not imposing solutions, but offering knowledge to those who sought it. Every major city had trained defenders against chemical threats, but more importantly, philosophers who understood the ethical weight of modification. Lydia, ancient beyond any natural measure but accepting her approaching end, called a final gathering. Representatives from every nation, every tradition, even the finite brotherhood and reformed gardeners attended. "We began trying to prevent death through poison," she said, her voice still strong despite her body's frailty. "We discovered that life and death, enhancement and limitation, poison and medicine, all are aspects of the same truth. The Shadow War taught us that humanity's greatest strength isn't in transcending nature, but in understanding our place within it." She presented the Academy's final protocol, a system where knowledge would be preserved but never imposed, where each generation could choose its path with full understanding of consequences. No more secret societies, no more hidden knowledge, but also no forced evolution or manufactured transcendence. The vote was unanimous. Even Priya, representing the gardener's millennia of selective cultivation, agreed. Humanity has earned the right to choose its future consciously, rather than have it chosen by shadows. Lydia died at dawn, exactly 50 years after the Shadow War began. Julia held her hand as she passed, surrounded by those whose lives she'd shaped. Students, former enemies, the children of those she'd saved. Her last words were, "The greatest aphrodisiac isn't a chemical. It's hope itself, the belief that tomorrow can be better than today." The funeral drew millions, not just Academy members but ordinary citizens whose lives had been touched by the Shadow War's resolution. Each brought a small vial, not of poison, but of medicine, antidote, or healing compound, creating a memorial of humanity's choice to heal rather than harm. Alexandra, now the Academy's leader, announced Lydia's final project, the Codex Vitae, a complete record of every poison, enhancement, antidote, and philosophical lesson learned during the Shadow War. It would be publicly available, ensuring no future generation could claim ignorance of the price of forced evolution. But the Codex's final entry, written in Lydia's hand, was the most important. We sought power over death and discovered respect for life. We pursued perfect bodies and found imperfect souls were more beautiful. We feared poison and learned that knowledge itself is the most dangerous substance and the most necessary. Use all wisdom carefully, for in every formula that can kill lies the secret of healing, and in every enhancement hides the seed of diminishment. The Shadow War ends not with victory, but with understanding. We are neither gods nor beasts, but humans, forever balanced between poison and cure, death and life, shadow and light. Choose wisely, for that choice, not any chemical, determines what we become. As the sun set on the ceremony, the Shadow War's last echo faded into history, leaving behind not fear but wisdom, not perfect humans, but conscious ones, not immortal bodies, but, perhaps, immortal lessons about the delicate, dangerous, beautiful balance of being human.
In the years that followed Lydia's passing, the world settled into a new equilibrium. The Academy continued its work, no longer as warriors in a shadow war, but as gardeners of human potential, carefully tending the delicate balance between progress and preservation. The ancient aphrodisiacs that had started it all, those Spanish flies, mysterious herbs, and exotic potions, were now understood not as tools of manipulation, but as teachers about desire itself. Love, the Academy taught, could never be forced through chemistry. True passion arose from connection, understanding, and choice. The Shadow War's greatest lesson was that every attempt to shortcut human experience through force, whether poison, enhancement, or artificial desire, ultimately failed. Only patience, wisdom, and respect for nature's pace brought lasting fulfillment. The Codex Vitae became humanity's guide, consulted whenever new discoveries threatened to tip the balance. Each generation read Lydia's words, understanding that they stood guard against shadows that would always exist where power and knowledge intersected. And in quiet moments, when students ground herbs in modern laboratories or scholars debated enhancement ethics, they remembered the Greek physician who had started as a maker of love potions and ended as wisdom's guardian. The Shadow War was over, but vigilance remained eternal. For in every heart that seeks shortcuts to love, in every mind that dreams of forced perfection, in every hand that reaches for power over nature, the Shadow War's temptation lingered. But so too did its lesson, that true strength lay not in controlling life and death, but in accepting both as partners in the beautiful, terrible, endlessly fascinating dance of being human. The ancients had sought aphrodisiacs to conquer love, but discovered that love, like life itself, could never be conquered, only honored, understood, and carefully, wisely, eternally protected from those who would poison its purity with forced desire.